In 1934, B.F. Skinner's at dinner, and he meets Alfred North Whitehead, a famous philosopher, English philosopher who happened to be at Harvard at the time teaching. And Skinner tells Whitehead about his emerging behavior analysis, and Whitehead thinks it's pretty good, but he says that he doesn't think it can account for human language. And in fact, he charges Skinner. Whitehead says, "Let me see if you can account for my saying there are no black scorpions falling on this table." Now, Skinner took up that challenge. He wanted to write an account in which he could explain Whitehead's saying there are no black scorpions falling on this table. And it took him a little while, 23 years, but in 1957 he published a book that he thought answered Whitehead's challenge. Now, Skinner makes some important moves in this book, reconceptualizing how we view certain things and what humans do. The first was, is this going to be a study of language? And what is language? Typically, when we think about language or when we talk about language, it's one of those things that we know what it is, but it's sort of hard to define. It involves speaking and other forms of communication. It involves the linguistic habits that certain societies or cultures have. But when the rubber hits the road, we're probably talking about mental rules, organizing spoken and written words. We're talking about how the mind arranges sentences and utterances, and past and current, private, past, perfect, past perfect tenses and organizations of nouns and verbs and all sorts of stuff like that. That's usually what we think of as a language. And that's not what Skinner wanted to do. He wanted to study behavior. So the next question is language behavior. The answer is probably not. That's probably not what we think of as language. We think of speaking as behavior, and talking as behavior, and listening as behavior, and communicating as behavior. But all of those are not exactly what we want either. And Skinner thought that by studying language, he was directing attention from what the individual is doing. It was directing attention away from behavior into some other place, measured, if at all, in different terms in a different dimension. That is, like, it took him into the mind, and he famously wanted to stay away from mental explanations of things. So the next move that Skinner made was that we're going to talk about where he's going to study behavior, but the thing that he noticed and the claim that he made was that verbal behavior is uniquely interesting because it operates on it's an interchange between at least two people in the beginning. It involves the speaker, the behavior of a speaker operating on a listener, and it involves understanding or studying the conditions under which he or she is speaking. So, verbal behavior is behavior whose reinforcement is mediated by another person. So already we're talking about an interchange of at least two people. The power of verbal behavior, and maybe this is a uniquely human experience, is that it allows us to affect the environment indirectly. So if you're a lion on the Serengeti and you haven't had water for 24 hours, you go to the pond and you get a drink of water. And there's no verbal behavior involved. This is you as a lion acting directly on the pond. But now you're a human, you're you again. If you haven't had water for 24 hours, you could ask a waiter for water at a restaurant. You could ask a friend to give you a drink of water. You could go through a drive-thru and get a cup of water from McDonald's. They might charge you for the cup. But it allows you to affect the environment indirectly. Your behavior, the reinforcement for asking for water, is mediated by another person. And this profoundly affects the range of influence we can have on our environment. We can affect our environment through other people. That's the real power of verbal behavior. The other move that Skinner makes is that this is a functional account. You can get water by asking for it from a waiter. If you're near somebody, you might gasp and hold your throat. You could write a note, "I want some water." You could sign. If you knew American Sign Language for water, you might do that. All of these very different forms of behavior are reinforced by another person providing you water. They're all reinforced by water. Skinner thought that these were all in the same class of operants. Okay, or operant. If we were to do an analysis of these separate behaviors, we would put them all in the same class as resulting in the same reinforcer or the same reinforcement. So the form of the behavior wasn't important to Skinner. It was the function, what the verbal behavior did for you. So these would all be in the same class of operants because they were reinforced by the same sort of event, and that is getting water. Skinner's account is an operant account. The 3- and 4-term contingency analysis of utterances, of communicative attempts, and so on is what we're going to emphasize here. Skinner was claiming that verbal behavior is operant behavior, mediated and moderated through other people's. Reinforcement is mediated through other people. So, in Skinner's verbal behavior, he has a couple of different categories. He first categorizes the first category of verbal behavior utterances or units that he talks about are mands. I think the word man comes from command or demand. It's verbal behavior that specifies its reinforcer, and its controlling variable is some deprivation, aversive stimulation, or establishing operation. Wait, what? What are you talking about? A controlling variable? What the heck is that? What Skinner was asking is what controls the emission of a mand. Now, we don't go around walking, and saying, water please, I'd like water please, I'd like water please, please can I have some water, can I have some water please? No, we say water, or we ask for water when and where water will, 1, function as a reinforcer, and 2, somebody is likely to give us water. So the 3-term contingency analysis is perfect for this. So when we ask about controlling variables, in the emission of a mand, that's why we say the deprivation, aversive stimulation, or establishing operation controls the emission of a mand. Part of the controlling variable is some level of deprivation, or you haven't had water for a while. If you're confused about what aversive stimulation means, just think about this. Think about you being next to your friend and they tell you that there's a spider on you. And what you say is, get it off, get it off, get it off. You're manding the removal of the spider. And the removal of the spider reinforces your mand of asking your friend to get it off. That's the behavior analytic account of verbal behavior. So that's what we think about when we think about mands. A tact was the other basic unit, one of the other basic units that Skinner identified. We think it comes from contact with the environment. You could see this as naming or identifying, technically speaking, its behavior occasioned by nonverbal discriminative stimuli. And it's reinforced by generalized nonspecific reinforcer. So, when a child says milk, in the presence of milk, she may be tacting it as if to say that is milk. But if she's thirsty, if she hasn't had milk for a while, if she hasn't had anything to drink for a while, she might be manding it. In other words, saying, I want milk. Even though a young child may say milk, whether it's a mand or a tact, depends. It depends on its controlling variables. The other thing is that the utterance is defined by its function rather than its form. And that's why we are emphasizing so heavily the controlling relation. If the controlling variable is deprivation, or establishing operation, versus discriminative stimulus, then that's the distinction between a mand and a tact. My wife once said to me in the wintertime, she said, it's cold in here. Now, if the listener says, if I say, yes, it is cold in here, and that seems to, be the controlling relation, then it's a tact. But if the listener gets up and turns up the heat, then it's a mand, and Skinner even called these hidden mands. So, whether an utterance is controlled by a generalized reinforcer or the event it specifies is what distinguishes a mand versus a tact, not its form. And that is really crucial to Skinner's account of verbal behavior, and it's really crucial to many therapies and so on. Skinner defined another class of behavior called intraverbal behavior. This is verbal behavior occasioned by other verbal behavior. If I said to you 2 + 2 equals, you might say 4. That's intraverbal behavior. If I say I tell my waiter I'll have the burger, and the waiter says lettuce, tomato, and onion, I might say just lettuce and tomato. I'm trying to get with her tonight. That is an example of intraverbal behavior. It's verbal behavior occasioned by other verbal behavior. Echoic behavior is the last of the sort of basic classes I'm going to talk about. There's many other forms, there's many other units of verbal behavior that Skinner talked about, but this is as far as I'm going to go. Whether I know we didn't answer the question about black scorpions, but you can certainly read the book and see if he answers it to your expectations. Echoic behavior is this like repeating? It's intraverbal behavior, he called it, with point-to-point correspondence. He also named some other forms of this textual behavior where you're copying. If you run into somebody in the hallway that you vaguely know, you might say good morning, and they'll say good morning back. You're at a restaurant, and the waitress might say, or the waiter might say to you, what would you like? And you might say, burger, fries with a Coke, and the waiter might repeat this to you, burger with fries and a Coke, got it. That's examples of echoic behavior. The reason I'm leaving off with echoic behavior is this question about whether animals exhibit echoic behavior. They repeat sounds, but they don't duplicate function. And the reinforcing relations are not mediated by another person. For example, birds will repeat car noises with no function. In other words, if you believe that animals are communicating or echoing, you have to account for a lot of different things. Skinner's account of verbal behavior says, yeah, animals don't echo. We define echoic behavior as point-to-point correspondence with a generalized reinforcer. Animals may echo the sounds, but they're not echoing the function. And because Skinner's account is based in function and not in form, then we can perfectly handle echoic animal behavior or repeating animals. They say all sorts of things that have no function, and that's one of the appeals of verbal behavior is that it distinguishes what animals are doing from what humans are doing in certain terms. It's not that animals don't engage in verbal behavior with humans. There's many people that say that dogs and cats, especially cats I hear, have particular meows that mean sort of pet me or food and so on, and that's sort of like verbal behavior. But in terms of a parrot repeating an utterance, Polly want a cracker, that's not always reinforced with a cracker. It might be an instance of generalized repeating or those sorts of things. So